Tara Browne and the Swinging London Colour Revolution by Vic Janham, Chapter 1. Hello. I used to be Tara Browne. Have you heard of that name? I was a hip kid in swinging London, where I was at the centre of things for almost 5 years, until a car accident in December '66 took my life away. Many people mourned me, as I was well known and beloved in the scene of popular musicians, models, photographers, artisans, artists, and their hangers-on. What nobody knew, and I mean literally nobody, is that it was a setup. I wasn't dead at all. I was transported somewhere else to live under a different name, very much like spies and informers who must fear for their lives are sometimes given a new identity, and for very similar reasons. I survived the car crash that supposedly killed me at age 21. The crash that was all over the press and even got me a mention in a Beatles song. You know, he blew his mind out in a car. That's from A Day in a Life, the closing song on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. You are forgiven to think it is about me. It was, in fact. But then it wasn't. I did not die, because it was just smoke and mirrors for the public eye. I was the it guy of the moment, the one that London swung about, and according to my handlers, I needed out. I wasn't absolutely convinced my time was up. I had 2 little children and I was in love with life. But considering what I knew and the way society was evolving, my handlers thought it better to turn me into a memory all of a sudden, an icon of a previous era. I come from a rich family, and both my mother and my father had lots of strings to pull, but neither would have been able to rescue me if they had been in the know, which I honestly believe they never were. You see, I was involved in this giant project of social engineering, just as most of the musicians of the 60s were, and that is a dangerous role to play. Ask Paul McCartney and Brian Jones, 2 of my dearest friends of the era. Paul would go a similar road as me, and Brian died for real, not because it was their time, but because some very powerful people thought they were starting to harm the product they had become. So they were taken out. I was now a dead person, somebody who no longer existed and was going to be forgotten soon. That was the hard part, I knew, to miss the sensation of knowing everybody I saw around me and be known to them. In my new surroundings, I would be unknown and supposed to be so for a while, at least until I had got used to my new me, the name and history someone had invented for me. I was going to become a written person instead of a living one. As it turned out, people back in London kept talking about me for quite some time after that fateful night that supposedly took my life away. So that made staying alive a little easier. At least they had really liked me. I learned about these facts from 2-week-old British newspapers. I was of money, see? I was used to be taken care of according to my wishes. That wasn't only pedigree. I had learned early on how to manipulate people, simply because they so easily accepted being manipulated. I was an artist before anything else. I played mind games with my mother's many guests, and usually beat them at it. Easy did it, honestly, as they were all so afraid, see, to come over as tough with the host's little boy. They wouldn't want to be sent packing in the middle of the night, with the nearest inn a 2-hour walk away. It was the perfect circumstance to stand out for a lad who had no other means at his disposal than his verbal abilities and a smile that turned most grown men into pedophiles. The 50s were my learning ground, and I knew the 60s were going to be mine. From the very first day onwards, still at the age of 14, I was going to be groomed to step into adulthood. As so often, I felt it could be done. I wasn't shy of myself, see? And I didn't like wasting on a claim. I was asked to play a role in turning London on to modern ideas as a part of a grand project of social engineering, of which I would only learn much further on, as I was focusing on my own part, the party part, as I used to call it, the mingling and being where the action is, becoming the action in the end. I thought it would be for a long time, that this was going to be a lifelong career, bringing people together and knowing what was going on in London's hip circles, and keeping my contact informed. As it turned out, things went differently. My life was officially cut short at the young age of 21, and ever since I have been forced to remain in the shadows, or the background if you wish. I have done some counseling work, and once my face had grown old enough to not be immediately recognizable as my old self, I was allowed to gradually return among the public. But all this was nothing compared to the exciting job I used to have in the early 1960s, the formative years of the great transition which has been quietly preparing Western society for the authoritarian approach modern thinkers believe our technological abilities warrant. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Back in the day, we were fully focused on the first step, which was introducing the concept of generation, the idea that each next cohort has its own unique experience which can only be shared with peers and which adults have no understanding of. It was a sentiment which had been stirring the American youth since the mid-50s, and which was now becoming more widely accepted on our side of the pond as well. As soon as children reached puberty, they were encouraged to stop listening to their parents and preferably rebel against them to make it very clear that their parental authority had ceased to exist and that they would be having no say in the future development of their offspring. That is what the 60s achieved, ripping apart the family unit which had been the cradle of morality, where children learned about life and forgiveness, where they were taught to be good, law-abiding citizens. We didn't want that anymore. We didn't want people to understand the reasoning behind the rules and norms that regulate human interaction. We wanted them to reject the mere idea of organization, to break free and egotistically seek their pleasures, because once you have people who are without a moral compass, who will do anything they can get away with, and who will only stop when they are confronted with the immediate and severe consequences of their behavior, all you need to do is tighten your rules and you can make people do exactly as you want them to. I led a mostly quiet life after I had stopped being Tara, hidden away from the prying masses. I took up gardening, which I had liked as a boy, and I learned to play some musical instruments, in particular the piano, drums, and the banjo, the latter to play Irish folk songs. Only later in life did I come back among the public, not because I was needed, but because I was granted permission to have a stroll through the neighborhoods of yore. I did this for the first time in 2003, a full 36 years after my death, and I was shocked at what I saw. People were living comfortably, all right, many more so than in my days when still a large part of the working class had hard, unforgiving lives. Now everybody had a car and a computer and went on holiday abroad. Yet everything seemed so controlled. There were so many little rules that shaped one's behavior. I saw a lot of stress, and the majority of the population looked depressed, despite their comfort. There was also much more aggression on the street, and the mix-up of people of so many different backgrounds, the famous multicultural society, didn't seem to be working out in the same way as the jubilant press used to be writing about the phenomenon. And it wouldn't get any better in the following years. I had left my hideout completely behind me now and was traveling the world, an old man speaking English in a forced upon him American accent, who enjoyed the company of people of all stripes and ages. Inevitably, the moment came I could no longer keep my mouth shut. Seeing where the world was heading, and not surprised by it at all, I started looking for a ghostwriter, someone who could tell my story better than I myself. I had tried out a couple of candidates, but never reached the point where I would spill some beans to see how they reacted. They just didn't seem up to either my truth or their task. And then I met Vic Janham, a charming character with knowing but unsatisfied eyes, and I knew immediately that he was going to be my man. A failed novelist, Vic described himself. He'd had a successful career as a copywriter and editor of various publications and possessed the imagination needed so as not to be afraid of anything I told him. After we had enjoyed each other's company for a while, two elderly men, 74 and 58 respectively, having dinner and drinks and walking the seashore, we were somewhere on the Mediterranean coast, I confided parts of my story to him. I told him I had been a different person a long time ago, and I gave him some names and facts he could easily verify. I knew Vic would check me out after such a wild claim, and he didn't disappoint me. It was true, he confirmed the next time we saw each other. There had been a Tara Browne, who could be considered one of the leading lights of swinging London, a precocious young man who for some reason was at the heart of many of the time's new trends and ideas. That was just my role, I answered modestly. I was often given information no one else had access to. And then there was a biography, said Vic, published not so long ago by a certain Paul Howard, a well-known Irish journalist and author who had been interviewing almost everyone who had known Tara. So Tara Browne was real. Had I read Howard's book, he wanted to know. I smiled. Of course I've read my biography. It's always interesting to learn what your old pals think of you 50 years down the road. I believe I came off lightly. After some shared laughter, I continued. They told my story as they knew it, which was the outside, the charming boy who helped create swinging London with his grace and pace. And they remembered many details much better than I could have. So thanks to all of them. Yet there is also the background that nobody was aware of, not even my wife, Nikki. Well, she may have had an inkling, as may have Paul McCartney and Brian Jones, because I spent a lot of time with them and they knew me really well. But I never spoke about why I acted as I did. It was more than just personal, see? I was on a mission. I was not to tell anybody, and I never did. It was my job to help create the 1960s in the way they played out, which was not by accident. I was the oil that got the machine going. I wasn't the only one. There was a league of people who were very much into what was about to happen next, who were surfing the vanguard, so to speak. Yet I was the perfect candidate. I had the money and the name. I am the son of a lord, born into the wealth of the Guinness family, of beer fame. I was smart and charming and not afraid of anything, and I was backed by powerful interests. That's why I want my side of the story to come out, to put whatever has happened since those early days in perspective. I am an old man now, and I don't care what may happen to me after my story is published. If they come after me, fine. I'm a lord's son, so I will not commit suicide. Not this time. Yet I will not run away from my executioners either. I want this to be my testimony to the world, my personal involvement in kickstarting the movement that would lead us to the situation we find ourselves in at present, on the brink of worldwide totalitarian rule. Totalitarian rule? Vic barked. Do you think so? It was the summer of 2019, and he was likely living in the illusion the endgame was still well ahead of us, which it technically would be for a few months more. I laughed my boyish laugh, carried by the pain of old age. This isn't going to last much longer, my dear. As an early victim, I may say I have also enacted the system's downfall. And now we are there. It is the end of the road for our happy-go-lucky society, either this winter or the next. That's quite near, Vic managed to shoot back. A high time to get my story out, wouldn't you say? Vic was silent for a while. You couldn't have waited so long, he finally said. Why didn't you come out a bit sooner? Good question. I guess I'm in on the game only enough to be given time to find a safe retreat. I could see the day creeping nearer over the last 2 decades, but I wasn't aware of any specific planning going on. Now I do know, thanks to a loose-lipped acquaintance who will remain in the shadows. So, what do you say? Would you be interested in writing down my version of my life? Would you be the one to break to the world how everything coming into being these days and the years ahead has been planned meticulously for well over 70 years? They always knew what they wanted. In fact, their favorite society looks a lot like Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Yet they lack the technological prowess to bring it into being. Now, with robotic advancement, gene modification abilities, and media power as they are, they feel they are ready. Who are these mysterious they? Vic asked. I'm not one to dismiss conspiracy theories outright, but I've always wondered who the people could be that apparently rule the world. How does one become a member of this elusive board? Money, dear, plus the desire and the talent to make your money work for you. I imagine money is of relative importance if you only have a monthly income to spend and can feel assured it will keep coming as long as you hang on to your job. But once you have amassed sufficient money to feel its power, that is, the possibility to buy other people's will, you will realize it can be the devil's tool in the hands of those who lack the moral fortitude to make the right choices. Unfortunately, this is true for most rich people. After all, their fortunes weren't created by being honest and upright. But let me return to my story. While behind the scenes techniques were developed to bring about the worldwide control grid Huxley wrote the original draft for, human society was being prepared for the inevitable by tearing it slowly apart, bit by bit, with every next social inspiration. Every decade had its own signature. Have you noticed? It can be seen as a descent into Dante's hell, 7 rungs down, from the 1960s to the 2020s. They gave us fun in return, the comfortable life, a bit of work for a bit of money, and lots of daily distractions. Some people protested it, as you may recall, but most went for its lure. The Americans got to enjoy their consumer society for 80 long years, the West Europeans for 60 years, the Mediterraneans for 40 years, and the East Europeans for less than 30 years. China and India have come in the mix, even more recently. And now it is over. Do you see why I couldn't tell my story any sooner? I need this final downfall to happen to be able to come out. Nobody would have believed me in peacetime. Yet, once your book is ready, the whole world will understand its message. So, my friend, are you in? I could see thoughts running around Vic's brain. I know what you're thinking. You think, if this is all true, it's a fantastic story. But if I'm lying, if it's all made up, you may get yourself in all kinds of trouble. It's a dilemma because you can't really solve it now. You can only decide with reasonable certainty whether I'm a liar or not once you have heard the whole story. Yes, he said, that is indeed my dilemma. It would be easy enough for you to read about Tara Browne yourself and come up with the idea that it was you who led this life a long time ago. It could in fact be a case of megalomaniac personality disorder. So you think I'm crazy? I exclaimed teasingly. Of course not, he retracted. But I must keep the possibility on the table that you may be a fantastic liar after all. Fair enough, I eased tensions. Are you looking for proof I am who I claim to be? Well, yes, that would make all the difference. But if I tell you a secret that cannot be verified because it can't be found anywhere on the internet, then how do you know I'm not making it up? I don't. That's the problem. And the people you could still visit to corroborate my story, will they remember the details I give you in the same way? Probably not. It's all a very long time ago, and old people often fill up their memory holes with fantasy. Well then, as I see it, there's only one solution to your dilemma. Let's get started. I will pay your expenses. See it as any other assignment. When the product is finished and I have given it my approval, you can always choose not to publish it. Though then you would lose all that possible revenue, of course. And remember to give me a free copy. Vic laughed. I guess you are right, Mr. Browne. I am a copywriter by nature. I write other people's story for money. So yes, I am one for the job. Consider me in. Splendid. Let's have lunch and then we should work out a practical routine. At my age, I prefer the early morning hours. Would that suit you?